Let me tell ya, I never thought a little piece of metal could carry so much power. But that day, it did. My daughter Natalie, bless her heart, or what used to be her heart, waltzed into my house like she owned the place. Her husband, Adrian, following close behind with that smarmy grin. They thought they had me cornered, thought they could bully me into handing over my hard-earned pension like it was candy at a kid's birthday party. I had asked them before, more times than I can count, to respect me, to leave my house. But did they? Nope. They just smiled, all fake sweetness and hidden daggers, like they were untouchable. But not today. Not anymore. Gimme that key right now, or I'm calling the cops, I said, my voice steady, my hands shaking just a little. Not from fear, but from that pent-up fury I'd been carrying for years. And I'm showing them everything. The binder, the videos, the neighbors' testimonies. You want to explain to the police why you're refusing to leave? Natalie, she fumbled in her purse like a nervous kid caught stealing cookies. And then, boom, out comes the key, thrown on the table so hard it bounced like it was alive. Take your damn key. I don't need it. I don't need anything from you, she spat. I bent down, picked it up, felt the cold weight of it in my hand, and oh, the memories. That key wasn't just metal. It was every hope I'd ever had that my daughter might love me for me, and not for what I had. But that was a long time ago. Now leave, I said, firm as a steel door. And don't come back unless you're willing to treat me with respect. Natalie froze, like she'd just seen a ghost. Her eyes darted between me and that black binder on the table, like it held some magic power she'd never thought I'd dare use. You can't do this to us, she said, voice trembling but defiant. We're your family. I'm your blood. Blood don't give anyone the right to treat me like dirt. Blood don't give you the right to my money, my house, or my life, I shot back. I put up with your nonsense for years, and that ends today. Adrian tried his usual charm move, putting on that fake soft expression. Come on, Eleanor, let's all calm down. Maybe we got our wires crossed. Maybe some stuff got misunderstood. I laughed, cold and sharp. There were no misunderstandings, Adrian. You demanded $1,500 a month. You threatened to declare me incompetent if I said no. You schemed to sell my house while I'm still alive. Everything is on tape. Everything is documented. You can't weasel your way out of that. Natalie buried her face in her hands for a hot second. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd feel remorse. But nah. She looked up and screamed, "This is your fault! You made us like this! Always stingy, always complaining, always making us feel guilty. What did you expect?" Excuse me? I'd raised her alone after her dad passed, worked double shifts at the hospital, paid for her car, her wedding, lent her money when I barely had any myself. And now I was the villain? My head spun, but I forced calm over rage. You're right, I said finally, my voice ice and fire all at once. It was my job to raise you, feed you, educate you. But you stopped being a kid over 20 years ago. Obligations turn into respect, into love, into give and take. You never learned to give. You only take. Adrian, sensing the tide turning, whispered, "Let's go, babe. Ain't worth it." They headed for the door, but Natalie paused, red-eyed, her voice trembling. You're gonna regret this, Mom. When you're old and alone, you'll remember this day. You chose money, over your daughter. I shook my head, steady. It's not money, Natalie. It's dignity. It's refusing to be treated like I'm nothing. If that means being alone, I'll take it over your toxic company. The door slammed behind him, rattling the whole house. I sank into my chair, shaking, not from fear, but relief. The years of holding my tongue, biting my lip, letting them run over me. They were done. Minutes later, Sarah, my friend and protector, knocked on the back door. She found me sitting in the dim afternoon light, tears quietly running. "Did you do it?" she asked. "I did," I said, voice thick. I showed him everything. They had a chance to see who they really were. She sat beside me, took my hand. "And how do you feel?" "Free," I whispered. "For the first time in years, I feel free. But I know freedom comes with a price." Oh, I didn't know how high that price was going to be, because Natalie and Adrian weren't done. They never would be. Little did I know, those slammed doors and angry words were only the beginning. By the next morning, my phone was blowing up with unknown numbers, and I had a sinking feeling that this battle was far from over. After that explosive confrontation, I thought maybe, finally, the storm had passed. But I was wrong. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for the next wave. I found myself constantly double-checking the locks, the alarm system, even peeking out the windows to make sure no one was sneaking around. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Every shadow in the hall made my pulse quicken. I had fought my own daughter and her husband, and the fear of retaliation clung to me like a second skin. Sarah came by almost every day, bringing groceries, staying for tea, keeping me company. She listened as I replayed every bitter word Natalie had hurled at me, every twisted accusation Adrian had made, every attempt they had used to intimidate me. She never judged, never interrupted. She just let me vent, her presence steady and grounding. It was the only thing that kept me sane during those first tense weeks. Then came the calls. Unknown numbers, some silent, some heavy with breathing, some desperate with fake sorrow. One voice, trembling and almost small, called out, "Mom, please, I just need to see you." It was Natalie, but not the girl I remembered. She sounded broken, defeated, almost like the girl she used to be. My gut twisted. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. I had to stay strong. Adrian started showing up too, like a shadow I couldn't shake. First at the grocery store, leaning casually in a corner, smirking like he owned the place. Then at the pharmacy, standing near the aisles I walked down daily, pretending to browse while keeping his eyes locked on me. Every encounter left me tense, ready to defend myself, but I refused to show fear. I had learned the signs of intimidation long ago. Every glare, every smirk, every casual run-in was calculated to make me feel small. Then the real storm hit. A certified letter. Hands trembling, I opened it. Lawsuit. Natalie and Adrian claimed I was mentally incompetent, that I'd been manipulated, that I owed them money for years of care they supposedly gave me. My heart pounded. They were trying to destroy me, legally and emotionally. I looked around my living room, at the photographs of my late husband and me. They were trying to destroy me, legally and emotionally. I looked around my living room, at the photographs of my late husband and me, at the furniture I'd carefully arranged, at the plants I nurtured, and I felt a surge of defiance. They were taking my life away, not if I could help it. Catherine came immediately. She read the letter carefully, making notes like she was preparing for battle. "Exactly what we expected," she said. "They're throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. But we have everything we need to crush this. Bank records, recordings, witness statements, we're ready." Her calm confidence eased me slightly, but the gnawing anxiety still lingered. Months of court, scrutiny, accusations, it was exhausting just to think about. Then Natalie's real weapon came out: rumors. Neighbors who once waved now avoided me. Whispers followed me in the aisles of the grocery store. People I trusted started questioning me. One longtime neighbor finally stopped me at the bakery. "Is it true? You kicked your daughter out? That you're being cruel?" My stomach sank. Natalie had begun a smear campaign, planting seeds of doubt in the community I had been part of for decades. The thought that my own daughter could manipulate people I'd trusted for years made my chest ache. And social media made it worse. Natalie posted herself as the victim, me as the greedy, heartless mother. Hundreds of comments, likes, and shares spread her story. People I'd never met expressed sympathy for her, believing her lies over the truth I lived daily. It was humiliating. I felt hollowed out, betrayed by my own blood. Catherine and Sarah worked tirelessly to document everything: the posts, the messages, the whispers. But still, the pain of being publicly slandered was raw. Adrian's intimidation escalated. One afternoon, leaving Sarah's house, I found him leaning against my car, smirk on his face, blocking my path. "Eleanor, we need to talk," he said. I raised my phone, recording. "Step away, or I call the police." He hesitated, then muttered, "This isn't over," before walking off. Every day, it felt like I was living in a war zone, a constant game of cat and mouse. They had chosen to make my life hell, and I had to stay one step ahead. Even when authorities came to check on me because of a false report about unsanitary living conditions, I faced them calmly. My home was spotless. My fridge full of fresh food. Medications organized. 30 minutes later, they left, shaking their heads. "Someone is stirring trouble," the lead social worker said. "It seems to be part of a family conflict. You're doing just fine." But the doubt lingered in people's minds. Some still whispered. Some still avoided me. I realized that winning the legal battle wouldn't necessarily fix the social damage. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I was preparing for a court battle that felt like it could swallow me whole. I had recordings, witnesses, evidence, but the uncertainty of how far Natalie and Adrian would go gnawed at me. Every time my phone rang, my heart skipped. Every new text or email from them felt like a landmine. I learned quickly that standing your ground wasn't just about fighting back. It was about surviving every mental and emotional trap they tried to set. Through it all, Sarah stayed close. She held my hand when my knees shook. She poured the tea I sometimes forgot to drink. She reminded me I wasn't alone. And slowly, I realized that this constant tension had awakened something inside me. A resilience I thought the years had worn down. I was still capable of protecting myself, of setting boundaries, of refusing to let anyone, even my own child, cross the line again. The courtroom loomed ahead like a mountain, but I felt steadier than I had in weeks. I wasn't just fighting for my money, my house, or my possessions. I was fighting for my dignity, my right to live my life on my own terms. Every lie they told, every whisper, every intimidation attempt, it all became fuel for my determination. The morning of the first court hearing, I woke up with a tight knot in my stomach. I had dressed and redressed 3 times before finally settling on something that made me feel both confident and serious. My hair, always neatly done, was combed carefully, and my hands shook just a little as I made my coffee. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her face calm, the kind of calm that made me feel like I could breathe again. She slid a small bag across the table. "You're going to need this," she said. Inside were snacks, water, tissues, and my phone fully charged. She didn't need to tell me. I already felt the weight of the day pressing down on me. By the time we arrived at the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered outside. A few neighbors waved supportively, and a couple of reporters were hanging around, cameras ready. I didn't care about the attention. What mattered was walking into that courtroom with my head held high, ready to face not just Natalie and Adrian, but the lies they had spent months spinning. Catherine was waiting for me at the entrance, her binder full of evidence clutched tightly under her arm. Her expression was that calm, confident one that I had come to rely on, like a lifeline. Walking in, I could see Natalie and Adrian sitting there, stiff, pale, tense. Natalie avoided my gaze completely, while Adrian's eyes flicked toward me, like he was trying to intimidate me, even from across the room. I ignored them. I had learned by now that the best way to take power away from manipulators was to refuse to react. The judge arrived, a tall man with a stern expression, and the proceedings began. Natalie's lawyer went first, speaking in polished tones, trying to paint me as weak, incompetent, and easily influenced. He spoke of manipulation, emotional abuse, and mental decline. I felt the old familiar sting of pain, but I focused on my breathing, on the proof I had gathered. When it was Catherine's turn, everything shifted. She laid out each piece of evidence methodically, audio recordings of threats, documents proving the loans I had given without expecting repayment, testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed the abuse firsthand, even medical certificates proving my lucidity and independence. Each piece was like a hammer striking down the false narrative they had spent months constructing. I watched Natalie sink lower in her seat with every document presented. Her hands trembled slightly, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity. But then Adrian's voice played on the recording. Threatening, cold, calculated, and my pity vanished. These weren't mistakes. These were deliberate acts meant to exploit and intimidate me. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. This wasn't just about winning. It was about revealing the truth that had been twisted by the very people I had once trusted most. The judge paused, reviewing the evidence carefully. The silence in the courtroom was almost unbearable. I could feel my heart thumping in my chest, my palms sweaty, my legs stiff. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was holding its breath. Then, finally, he spoke. I find that the allegations of mental incompetence against Mrs. Ellen A. Carter are completely unfounded, he said, his voice firm. Medical evaluations are recent, thorough, and conclusive. Furthermore, the evidence presented by the defense demonstrates a clear pattern of manipulation and financial abuse by the plaintiffs. I felt a rush of relief, but I kept my composure. This wasn't over until the gavel struck. He continued, recounting the recordings, the documents, the testimonies. The plaintiffs attempted to coerce Mrs. Carter into giving them money through threats and intimidation. Their subsequent actions, including public defamation and harassment, reinforce the need for Mrs. Carter to protect herself legally. Therefore, I dismiss this lawsuit in its entirety and order the plaintiffs to pay legal costs. Natalie's lips quivered, a choked sob escaping her throat. Adrian's jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. The judge didn't pause there. He issued a temporary restraining order, forbidding them from coming within 100 yards of my home or contacting me in any way for the next 6 months. Any violation of this order will result in criminal charges, he said, and the bang of the gavel echoed like thunder in the room. I felt Catherine squeeze my hand. Sarah, seated behind me, rested a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just winning a court case. I was reclaiming my life. Every threat, every intimidation, every lie had failed. They had tried to break me, but I had held fast. Leaving the courthouse, I saw Natalie glance back at me. There was no rage in her eyes this time, only fear. For the first time, I think she understood the consequences of her actions. Adrian's expression was carefully neutral, but the tension radiating off him betrayed his frustration. Their lives, built on exploiting me, were crumbling under the weight of their own choices. In the following weeks, news filtered in through Sarah and neighbors. Without access to me or my money, Natalie and Adrian were struggling. The apartment they had flaunted was gone. The car repossessed. Adrian had to take a construction job, something he had always considered beneath him, while Natalie worked as a supermarket cashier. Their online presence dwindled. The glamorous, perfect life they had tried to project vanished like smoke. Meanwhile, my life changed in the quietest, most comforting ways. I walked freely in my neighborhood, without fear of being watched or followed. My garden flourished under my care, and the plants seemed to bloom just for me. I volunteered more regularly at the hospital, helping organize activities, laughing with patients, sharing stories. Sarah and I took trips to nearby cities, small adventures we had never taken when I was tied down by fear and manipulation. I felt a subtle shift inside me, a release I hadn't known was possible. I had survived not just threats and lies, but the betrayal of my own child. I had proven to myself and to the world that dignity, respect, and self-protection were worth every ounce of struggle. I began to meet other women who had faced similar trials, forming a support group that met every other week, sharing our experiences over coffee, swapping advice, laughing and crying together. It reminded me I wasn't alone. For the first time in years, I felt the calm of safety, the comfort of being in control of my own life. Yet somewhere deep inside, a quiet thought lingered. Natalie and Adrian hadn't disappeared completely. Their actions had consequences, yes, but I knew the storm wasn't truly over. Somewhere, they were plotting, hoping to find a weakness, hoping I would slip. I couldn't let my guard down. Not yet. Even so, there was a strange, bittersweet satisfaction in knowing I had survived. That I had held my ground. I had been strong when it mattered most. I had chosen dignity over fear, honesty over lies, and myself over those who would use me. The road ahead would still have challenges, but for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Real, unshakable strength. Life had begun to settle into a rhythm that felt almost normal, almost safe, but I knew better than to let myself believe the storm was truly over. Even with the restraining order in place, Natalie and Adrian weren't the kind of people who gave up easily. I could feel the tension in the air, subtle at first, like the quiet hum before a thunderstorm. Every unknown call, every glance from the corner of my eye, every unusual email made my chest tighten. But I refused to live in fear. I had fought too hard, sacrificed too much to allow them to control my life from the shadows. One morning, Sarah came over with a stack of newspapers. "Ellie," she said, trying to sound casual, but her face betrayed worry. "Look at this." I took the papers, scanning the headlines. Natalie had gone full-blown on social media again. She was painting herself as the victim, a poor girl abandoned by her cruel mother, trying to survive in a world that had been too harsh. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Her words were false, exaggerated, manipulative, but the worst part was seeing some neighbors and distant acquaintances taking her side. I felt a familiar mix of frustration and sorrow. People believed lies more easily than they believed truth. Catherine had warned me that this would happen. "They'll try everything," she had said. Public opinion, rumors, petty harassment. But remember, every lie they tell leaves a trail. Document it all. Keep your evidence tight. You're already winning. You just need to protect it. And so I did. Every call I didn't answer, every suspicious message I saved and forwarded to Catherine, every whisper I heard, I documented. It became a ritual, like tending a garden that could grow weeds if left unattended. A week later, Adrian escalated. I spotted him at the pharmacy, pretending to browse the shelves while keeping an eye on me. My stomach dropped, but I stayed calm. I didn't confront him. Instead, I slowly pulled out my phone, recording the entire encounter. He noticed immediately, of course, and gave me a stiff, forced smile before leaving. I sent the video to Catherine immediately. She added it to the growing case file, her voice calm as always. "See? Evidence. Every move they make leaves proof behind." It wasn't just the outside world that tried to shake me. The memory of their betrayal sometimes crawled inside my own mind, whispering doubts, making me question whether I had done the right thing. But every time it crept in, I reminded myself of the black binder, of the audio recordings, of the documents that proved my truth. I reminded myself that self-respect had a price, and I had paid it to protect my life, my dignity, and my freedom. Then came the anonymous complaint to Adult Protective Services. I remember the morning vividly. 2 social workers arrived, polite but professional, explaining they had to check on my well-being due to a report they had received. My heart pounded. Was this a trick? Another attempt by Natalie and Adrian to manipulate the system? I let them in, guiding them through every room. Every surface was clean, every document organized, every little corner of my home orderly. My medications were lined up, my fridge full of fresh food. Everything exactly as it should be. They inspected, asked questions, and took notes. Finally, the lead social worker looked at me with an apologetic expression. "Mrs. Carter, your house is in perfect condition. You clearly care for yourself very well. This case is unfounded. We'll be closing it." I exhaled deeply, feeling a wave of relief. "Can I know who made the report?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She shook her head. "Confidential," she said, "but it seems part of a family conflict. Legal resources are available if needed." My hands shook slightly as they left. Relief and exhaustion collided in my chest, but the knowledge that I had passed their scrutiny with flying colors gave me a quiet sense of victory. Even with these victories, life demanded vigilance. I installed new locks, reinforced my security system, and kept my phone charged at all times, ready for emergencies. I felt safer, yes, but I knew it was only temporary unless I remained cautious. And I would. I had learned the hard way that complacency was a luxury I could not afford. Despite the tension, life outside the threat began to bloom. I reconnected with my neighbors, many of whom had been quietly supportive from the start. I spent time in my garden, nurturing flowers that seemed to mirror my own resilience. Sarah and I planned small trips, drove to nearby towns we had only dreamed about before, and laughed freely in a way that had been impossible for years. The world felt wider, freer, and more forgiving than it had in decades. But just when I began to feel that I had regained control, a letter arrived. No return address. Familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it, half expecting another attempt at manipulation. Inside was Natalie's writing, hesitant and unfamiliar. It didn't beg forgiveness or demand anything, but it hinted at a shift. She spoke of lessons learned through hardship, of understanding that life wasn't always meant to be easy, of finally seeing things she had refused to before. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I placed the letter in a drawer, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. She was starting to see the truth, but it was too little, too late for me to rush toward reconciliation. I had my life, my peace, and my dignity intact, and that was enough. Even in the quiet moments, I remained vigilant. The storm had passed, but the clouds would always linger on the horizon, reminding me that I had fought for something far more precious than money or control. I had fought for my very self. Even with the restraining order in place, the silence from Natalie and Adrian felt eerie, like the calm before another storm. Weeks passed, but my instinct told me they weren't done. Every unknown call, every glance from someone in the neighborhood who seemed a little too curious reminded me that vigilance was necessary. I had built a fortress of safety, but I knew the real battle wasn't just legal, it was psychological, and they were experts in pushing buttons. One evening, Sarah and I were sitting on the porch, sipping tea, watching the sun melt into the horizon. The air smelled of jasmine, and the world seemed peaceful, almost deceptively so. "Ellie," Sarah said quietly, "have you thought about how long this might last? How long they'll keep prying?" I stared at the fading light, letting it wash over me. "As long as it takes," I answered. "They want control, not reconciliation. They want to intimidate me, to make me second-guess myself. But I won't let them." Sarah nodded, gripping my hand firmly. "You've already shown them, Ellie. You're stronger than they ever imagined." I smiled faintly, but deep inside, a part of me knew she was right. Strength alone wouldn't be enough if they found new ways to attack. A week later, I started noticing small but deliberate provocations. Someone would leave an envelope in my mailbox. No name, just a vague threat written inside. "You'll regret this. You can't hide forever." I didn't recognize the handwriting at first, but the signature style screamed Adrian. The words were empty, but they carried weight. The weight of someone who had spent years watching, manipulating, and demanding. I kept the envelopes, photographing them and forwarding everything to Catherine. "They're testing boundaries," she said over the phone. "They're trying to see how far they can push. Stay calm. Document everything." Then came the night I found my car scratched. A deep, jagged line down the side, as if someone had deliberately tried to send a message. My stomach dropped, and anger bubbled under my skin. But I refused to react in haste. I called the police immediately, filed a report, and again documented everything for Catherine. By morning, neighbors had started whispering. I could feel their eyes on my house, some sympathetic, some doubtful, and some curious in the way only small-town neighbors can be. I reminded myself again, truth matters, but perception is a battlefield. And in that battlefield, Natalie and Adrian were seasoned warriors. A few days later, the harassment became more direct. I spotted Adrian standing across the street from my house while I watered my garden. He didn't approach, didn't make a sound, but the stare was deliberate, chilling. I quickly went inside, locked the doors, and recorded the encounter. "Ellie," Sarah said later when she arrived, reviewing the video with me, "he's escalating. This isn't just threats anymore. He's testing limits. You need to be ready for the next move." And the next move came faster than I expected. That very night, there was a knock on the door. My heart leaped, but I reminded myself, the restraining order was in place. No one could legally come within 100 yards. I peeked through the peephole and saw Natalie, her face pale, her eyes wide. But the expression wasn't anger. It was desperation. She pounded on the door. "Mom, please, open the door. I need to talk to you." I froze, my pulse hammering. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Ellie, don't open it. Call the police. Document it." I nodded, dialing 911. Natalie's voice rose. pleading, but every word dripped with guilt and manipulation. Please, I've changed. I swear, I'm different. Don't do this to me. I stayed calm, recording everything from inside. The dispatcher confirmed the situation, assuring us officers were on their way. Natalie finally left after 20 minutes of pounding and shouting. And we watched her retreating figure from the security camera feed. The next morning, another letter arrived, this time taped to the door. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. I opened it cautiously. It read, "Mom, I can't live like this anymore. I'm sorry for everything. I need to make this right. Please respond. Please." My stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to run to her, to demand an explanation, but I held firm. Catherine's voice echoed in my mind. "You already won. You've defended yourself. This is about control, not reconciliation." Days turned into weeks, and Natalie's attempts became less about intimidation and more about emotional leverage. She began sending messages, photos, and even small gifts to my neighbors, trying to manipulate public perception. Some neighbors were sympathetic to her. Some were confused. But I stayed above it all, documenting every interaction, every gift, every whispered rumor. I refused to be baited into confrontation. One afternoon, Sarah and I were sitting on the porch when my phone rang. The caller ID was blocked, but I answered. It was Natalie. Her voice sounded weak, almost broken. "Mom, please, we can talk. I've changed. I just want a chance to explain." I held the phone tightly, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to hang up, but another part of me wanted to hear the truth. "Natalie," I said carefully, keeping my voice steady. "I've heard your words before. Actions matter more than promises. If you truly want change, you'll respect the boundaries you set yourself. Until then, leave me in peace." There was a long silence on the other end. Then she whispered, almost inaudibly, "I don't know if I can do that." And the line went dead. My chest tightened. The confrontation wasn't over, not by a long shot. I looked at Sarah, her expression grave. "This isn't ending," she said softly. "Not yet. But you know how to protect yourself now. You've been through the fire, and you've survived." I nodded, feeling the weight of truth in her words. Survival was one thing. The next phase, the real reckoning, was just beginning. Weeks slipped by, but the quiet wasn't comforting. It was charged with tension. The kind that sets your nerves on edge, even when nothing happens. Natalie and Adrian had disappeared from the streets, the grocery store, the pharmacy, but I could feel them lurking in the shadows, plotting, waiting for a mistake. Every glance from a passing neighbor, every unfamiliar car parked nearby, reminded me that this war wasn't over. I had won in court, yes, but the emotional battlefield was far from settled. One morning, I received a message that made my blood run cold. It wasn't from Natalie, at least not directly. The text was anonymous, but it carried the tone I knew too well. The signature threat of Adrian. "You can't hide. We know where you are. You'll see us again." My hands trembled, and I called Catherine immediately. "Ellie, document it," she said calmly, yet there was a note of concern in her voice. "This is intimidation. We will add it to the case. Do not respond, do not react. They want to rise out of you. I obeyed, taking screenshots, saving the message, and forwarding it. That evening, Sarah insisted I not be alone. She stayed over, keeping watch while I tried to sleep. But sleep refused me. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows set my heart racing. Around midnight, there was a faint scratching at the back door. My pulse shot up, my chest tightened. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself, and grabbed my phone, opening the camera feed from the back security camera. The figure was small, hunched, familiar. Natalie. She was standing there, her face obscured by a hood, shaking slightly as she pounded on the door. Sarah and I watched in frozen terror. I didn't want to open it, not under any circumstances. Yet the voice inside me whispered that this could be the moment she truly needed help, or another trap. I took a deep breath, stayed silent, and dialed 911. By the time the police arrived, Natalie had vanished. The officers checked the perimeter, took statements, and assured us they would keep an eye on the area. But the lingering fear, the knowledge that she had come this close, left a chill that no warm tea or comforting words could erase. I locked every door twice, checked a security system, and refused to sleep until the sun rose. Sarah held my hand, murmuring reassurances I barely heard, my mind replaying every past confrontation, every threat, every manipulation. The following week brought more subtle harassment. I found notes slipped under the door, some apologetic, some threatening, all designed to provoke anxiety and guilt. Catherine advised patience. "Ellie, this is classic psychological warfare. They are desperate. They are trying to break you emotionally because they cannot break you legally. Document, ignore, protect yourself." I followed her instructions meticulously, cataloging every envelope, every scribbled word, every phone call. Then one Tuesday, the unimaginable happened. I returned home from my volunteer work at the hospital to find my mailbox stuffed with letters, hundreds of them, many anonymous, some from strangers, some bearing Natalie's unmistakable handwriting. Some praised her story, claiming I was cruel and selfish. Some threatened me, warning that karma would come for me. I felt my stomach drop, a wave of panic I hadn't felt in months. I couldn't believe the scale of her reach. She wasn't just trying to intimidate me privately. She was orchestrating a public campaign to destroy my reputation. Sarah arrived minutes later, her face pale as she surveyed the chaos. "Ellie, we have to be careful," she said firmly. "This is escalating beyond what we've dealt with before." I nodded, feeling the weight of helplessness creeping in. For a moment, I thought about abandoning the house, leaving everything behind. But then I looked around, the home I had fought so hard to protect, the sanctuary I had built with years of labor and love, and I clenched my fists. No, I wouldn't run. I had earned the right to my peace, and no one, not even my own daughter, could take it from me. Days turned into a week of tense vigilance. Every noise, every unexpected movement was a trigger. And then, late one night, the phone rang. It was a blocked number, and my heart sank. I answered, keeping my voice calm, despite the fear curling in my stomach. "Mom?" Natalie's voice whispered, soft and trembling. I need to talk, please." Her tone wasn't pleading. It was desperate, raw, as if she were standing on the edge of something she couldn't control. "Not tonight, Natalie," I said firmly. "I've made myself clear. You cannot approach me. You cannot manipulate me. If you want to talk, it has to be through the proper channels." The line went silent. Then, quietly, she said, "I don't know how to stop." And just like that, she hung up. My hands shook as I placed the phone down. For the first time, I realized the full extent of the chaos I had to guard against. Not just threats or lies, but her own inability to face consequences. The next morning, I called Catherine, explaining the call in detail. "Ellie, this is escalation," she said with an edge of warning. "They're unraveling. They're desperate. You must be more vigilant than ever. No direct contact. Everything goes through me now." I agreed, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down like a stone on my chest. The law could protect me, yes, but it could not erase the fear, the exhaustion, the constant vigilance required to live without being stalked, emotionally and physically, by people who once claimed to love me. As the weeks went on, Natalie's desperation began to show cracks. The letters became less frequent, more scattered. The phone calls diminished. She tried, subtly, to reinsert herself into my life through acquaintances, leaving hints and half-truths. But the strength I had cultivated over months of trials held firm. I didn't answer. I didn't react. I observed, documented, and maintained my boundaries without exception. But then came the final, chilling moment that made me realize this was far from over. I found a small package left on my doorstep. No note, no name. Inside was a photo from years ago, me, younger, smiling, unaware of the manipulations to come, alongside a single, handwritten word: remember. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just harassment. This was Natalie, Adrian, their manipulation, their obsession, their refusal to accept boundaries, all condensed into one terrifying gesture. I felt my heart pound. I felt the old fear creep back. But I also felt something else, a fierce, burning resolve. I picked up my phone and called Catherine. "We're not done," I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled. "They've gone too far this time. It's coming to an end, one way or another." And I knew, deep in my bones, that the final confrontation was approaching, a moment that would demand every ounce of courage, every shred of strategy, and every hard-earned lesson I had learned through months of battle. The following morning, the first rays of sunlight felt almost blinding after nights of tense vigilance. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea, trying to calm my racing thoughts. That package, that single word, remember, was gnawing at me, a dark reminder that Natalie and Adrian weren't done. I glanced around my living room, the familiar furniture, the framed photos, the small garden visible through the window. This was my sanctuary, and I wasn't going to let them turn it into a battleground. Sarah arrived right on time, carrying a thermos of coffee and a worried expression. "Ellie, I think we need to consider security upgrades," she said softly. "Not just cameras and locks, but motion sensors, alarms, maybe even a temporary safe room if things escalate." I nodded, appreciating her practicality. Over the next 2 days, we installed additional security measures: reinforced locks, exterior cameras with live feed to our phones, and a panic button connected to the local police. Catherine approved everything, emphasizing the importance of preparation. Even with these precautions, the tension never fully eased. Every unfamiliar car passing my street, every shadow flitting across my windows, kept me alert. My volunteer work at the hospital became both a distraction and a lifeline. Organizing activities for long-term patients, chatting with colleagues, helping patients feel seen and valued, it reminded me that life continued beyond fear, beyond manipulation. Yet, in the quiet moments, my mind returned to Natalie and Adrian, to the knowledge that they were planning, watching, waiting. Then came the call that changed everything. It was Catherine, sounding more urgent than usual. "Ellie, listen carefully. We just received notice. Natalie and Adrian have filed an emergency motion in court. They're claiming immediate access to your finances and residence, alleging that you've been hiding assets and endangering them. It's a blatant escalation, but it's real. You need to be ready." I felt my stomach drop. After months of maintaining boundaries, of documenting harassment, of securing my home, they were trying to drag me back into chaos legally. I spent the day reviewing documents with Catherine, compiling every piece of evidence we had, the recordings, the testimonies, the letters, the anonymous threats, and the photograph from the doorstep. Every detail mattered. Every line of proof would show that the plaintiffs were attempting to manipulate and intimidate, not that they had any legitimate claim. Hours passed as we meticulously prepared, double-checking everything, ensuring nothing could be used against me. That evening, while I tried to relax with Sarah, my phone rang again. This time, it was an unblocked number. My heart leapt, and I debated whether to answer. The voice that came through was calm, almost eerily composed. "Mom," Natalie said. There was no tremor, no hint of vulnerability. "I know you're preparing for the court tomorrow. I just want you to know something." I kept the phone steady, my voice cold. "I'm listening, but I'm not negotiating outside of legal channels." She laughed softly, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "You think you've won, but the real game is just beginning. You've built walls around yourself, locked doors, cameras, alarms, but you can't lock your life away. You can't control everything forever." Her words were designed to provoke fear, to make me doubt my decisions. But I had learned to see through this. I didn't respond, only recorded the call. The next morning, I arrived at court with Sarah and Catherine, feeling the familiar knot of anticipation in my stomach. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with the energy of confrontation. Natalie and Adrian sat across from me, their faces rigid, eyes filled with a combination of anger and desperation. I stayed calm, sitting with my spine straight, hands folded neatly in my lap. I was ready. When the judge entered, Natalie's lawyer wasted no time. He began with accusations, painting a picture of me as an unstable, selfish mother, hiding assets, threatening her daughter. But Catherine countered with precision and evidence. Every claim was dismantled methodically. She presented bank records, legal documents, video and audio recordings, witness testimonies, and even the photograph Natalie had used as intimidation. The courtroom fell silent as Catherine meticulously built the case, showing the plaintiff's pattern of manipulation, harassment. And every claim was dismantled methodically, and coercion. I watched as Natalie's composure cracked, her hands trembling as she realized that her carefully crafted narrative was falling apart. Adrian's jaw tightened, his eyes darting nervously to the documents and recordings being presented. The evidence was undeniable. They had tried to manufacture a crisis, to paint me as incompetent, to frighten me into submission. But every attempt had been meticulously recorded, every lie documented. Hours passed, and when Catherine finally concluded, the judge leaned back, studying the evidence in silence. My heart pounded as the room held its breath. Then, with a firm and resolute voice, he spoke. After reviewing the evidence and testimony, it is clear that Mrs. Carter has acted within her rights to protect herself. The claims of asset concealment and endangerment are unfounded. In addition, the plaintiff's actions constitute harassment, intimidation, and an ongoing attempt at coercion. The judge's gaze swept over Natalie and Adrian, piercing and resolute. Therefore, this emergency motion is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, any further attempts to intimidate or manipulate Mrs. Carter will result in immediate legal action, including criminal charges. Natalie gasped, a sound of disbelief mixed with rage. Adrian clenched his fists, his face pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. I felt a surge of relief, but also a strange, lingering sorrow. This was victory, yes, but the scars of their manipulation, the years of psychological warfare, were not easily erased. I had won legally, but the emotional battle had been long and brutal. As we left the courthouse, Sarah squeezed my hand. "You did it, Ellie," she said softly. "You faced everything, stood your ground, and won. Not just in court, but in reclaiming your life." I nodded, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and empowerment. I had faced my daughter and her partner, their threats, their lies, their harassment, and I had not broken. I had defended my dignity, my home, and my peace. But even as we walked to the car, a small, lingering thought haunted me. Natalie's words from the night before echoed in my mind. You can't control everything forever. She had tried to intimidate me, to make me fear the future, to suggest that my victory was temporary. And in some ways, she was right. Life could throw challenges my way, and there was no way to predict every move she might attempt. But one thing was certain. I would face them on my terms, prepared, resolute, and unbroken. The weeks after the courtroom victory were quiet, almost surreal. No calls from Natalie or Adrian, no messages, no threats, just an uneasy silence that felt like the calm after a storm. I spent my mornings tending to the garden, afternoons at the hospital volunteering, and evenings with Sarah, laughing over shared memories and planning little trips we'd never had time for before. For the first time in years, my days felt mine. Mine to enjoy, mine to fill with people who valued me, and mine to live without constant fear or guilt. Yet, despite the peace, there was an undercurrent of wariness. I knew that victory in court didn't erase the years of manipulation, didn't instantly heal the wounds they'd left, and certainly didn't guarantee they wouldn't try again in some subtle or hidden way. I found myself checking the locks obsessively, double-checking the security feeds, even pausing before answering unknown calls. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. I refused to allow my hard-won freedom to be jeopardized. One rainy afternoon, a delivery arrived. A small, nondescript package with no return address. My heart skipped. I set it down carefully on the kitchen counter, then called Sarah over. "Ellie, be careful," she warned, eyes sharp. I nodded, glancing at the box, as if it might explode with whatever it contained. Slowly, deliberately, I opened it. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. No threats, no legal documents, just handwriting I immediately recognized. Natalie's. I unfolded the letter with trembling hands. "Mom, I've been thinking. I've been forced to see the consequences of my choices. The life I thought I deserved doesn't exist, and it's all because of me. I don't expect forgiveness. I needed you to know I see things differently now. I don't want anything from you, just to say I'm beginning to understand. Natalie." I held the paper, reading it again and again. Part of me ached, the part of me that still longed for the daughter I had raised, the girl I remembered from her childhood, who had once laughed without malice. But another part, the part that had fought so hard to reclaim her life, felt a cautious, measured hope. Finally, someone had acknowledged the truth, even if quietly, even if late. Sarah hugged me tightly. "Ellie, this is progress. You don't have to respond." "But at least she's admitting something." I nodded. "Yes, but it's a fragile acknowledgement, and I won't let it unsettle my peace." The days turned into weeks. I maintained my routines, slowly relaxing the constant tension I had carried for so long. At the hospital, the patients began to notice a lightness in me, a warmth that had been absent during the months of fear and uncertainty. I laughed more freely, encouraged others more openly, and allowed myself the joy of simple pleasures. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery, a cup of coffee on my porch, the sunset painting the sky in pinks and oranges. Then came the most unexpected moment. One Sunday morning, while walking through the local park, I saw a mother and daughter sitting on a bench, their heads close together, whispering, laughing. The girl reminded me so much of Natalie at that age. Spirited, curious, full of life. I sat on a nearby bench, watching them. For a moment, a pang of longing struck me, the yearning for a mother-daughter connection that had been stolen. But as I observed them, I also realized something crucial. Love, respect, and family weren't owed automatically. They had to be nurtured, earned, and freely given. Later that afternoon, Sarah stopped by with tea and a mischievous smile. "You know," she said, "I think you finally found it, Ellie. You found your peace, your life without compromise." I smiled faintly. "Yes, and it's stronger because it's mine. I fought for it, and I will protect it." Life continued. I invested time in friends, in volunteer work, and in enjoying my pension in ways that brought joy, not stress. I traveled with Sarah to nearby cities, taking small trips that became memories I would treasure forever. I joined a small support group of women who had faced similar challenges, sharing stories, advice, and empathy. In their company, I realized I wasn't alone, and I never had to be. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in golden hues, I sat on my porch, reflecting on the journey. The black binder I had handed Natalie and Adrian was no longer just a collection of documents. It was my statement, my promise to myself that I would never again allow anyone to strip me of my dignity. I had defended my home, my finances, and my peace. I had faced manipulation, lies, and emotional warfare, and I had won. A year later, I walked into the grocery store and saw Natalie again. She was older, tired, her movements slower. Our eyes met for a brief second, and I saw regret, a flicker of understanding. She didn't approach, and I didn't move toward her. For the first time in years, we coexisted in the same space, without confrontation, without manipulation, without expectation. She had learned, painfully, that life wasn't a game to control. And I had learned that peace was worth far more than a relationship built on fear or exploitation. That night, Sarah and I sat on the porch, sipping tea, watching the stars emerge. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. I thought for a long moment, then shook my head. I regret that it had to come to this. I'll regret the pain and the betrayal. But I do not regret defending myself. I do not regret choosing dignity over deceit. I do not regret protecting my life and my peace. Sarah smiled, squeezing my hand. "Then you're finally free, Ellie." I gazed at the night sky, feeling the weight of years lift, replaced by a quiet, enduring strength. I had faced the people I loved and lost, the manipulation and the threats, and emerged whole. Life would continue to bring challenges, as it always does, but I now had the most important armor: self-respect, boundaries, and the courage to defend them. Today I am alone, not in loneliness, but in liberation. And for the first time in decades, I am at peace. The black binder remains on my shelf, a silent testament to my fight, my victory, and my promise to myself. My life, my dignity, and my peace are mine to keep, and no one, not Natalie, not Adrian, not anyone, can ever take that from me again.